I caught one tiny mistake, one slip of the tongue, and suddenly the last 3 years of my life unraveled like a cruel joke. Everyone tells me to move on, but how do you move on from this? If this made your day easier, make mine better with a quick like and subscribe. Thank you. The electrician walked into my house like it was any other day, but then something strange happened. He looked at my wife, really looked at her, and his whole expression shifted. His tool belt rattled as he froze mid-step. And then he said a name that wasn't hers. Crystal? My wife's hand stopped halfway to her lips, coffee mug trembling just slightly. Her eyes widened and her voice went sharp and high. My name is Diana, she said, forcing a little laugh that didn't sound like her at all. The guy flushed beet red. He stammered, scratching at his neck. Sorry. You just look exactly like someone I know. Crystal. Before I could even process, Diana set down her mug so fast it sloshed onto the counter and excused herself to the bathroom. The sound of the door clicking shut was way too quick, way too rehearsed. The electrician kept fumbling with his screwdriver, but I caught him glancing at the hallway where she'd disappeared. Over and over again. Finally, I snapped. How do you know my wife? The guy's hand jerked, his screwdriver clattered onto the tile, and he scrambled like a guilty kid to pick it up. I don't, he muttered, not even meeting my eyes. I was just confused. But his whole body screamed liar. When he left, Diana came back out, calm as ever, pretending like nothing had happened. Except she kept checking her phone every 2 seconds, fingers twitching across the screen. That night, when she was asleep beside me, I pulled out my phone. I typed Crystal into Google, added some physical details that matched Diana. What came up made my chest tighten like a vice. Video after video. Adult sites. Hundreds of clips featuring a woman who looked exactly like my wife. Same body. Same face. Same voice. Her stage name? Crystal Diamond. And the dates on those videos? They went back 3 years. The exact 3 years Diana had been working from home as a freelance consultant. My hands shook as I clicked through. Millions of views. A butterfly tattoo on her hip that was impossible to deny, the same tattoo she'd gotten on our anniversary. I teased her then, called her my Crystal Diamond. The next morning, I confronted her. You're Crystal Diamond, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. The plate slipped from her hands and shattered on the kitchen floor, scrambled eggs splattering across the tile. She didn't even try to deny it. She just dropped into a chair, shoulders shaking as she began to cry. But those tears, they didn't look real. They looked rehearsed. So I asked the only question that mattered. Where's the money? These sites get millions of views. Where's all that money from the past 3 years? Her sobs cut off instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. Her face hardened, cold and calculating. $470,000, she said flatly. Offshore accounts. You'll never touch it. The air left my lungs. $500,000. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks at the warehouse, busting my back loading trucks, taking every bit of overtime I could, she'd been hoarding nearly $500,000 in secret. We'd been eating ramen every night. Sitting in the dark because the electricity got cut off twice last year. I'd even sold my father's old truck, the one he restored with his own 2 hands before he passed. I'd let it go for $3,000 just so we could afford her mother's funeral. And now she looked me in the eye and said, I make that much in a weekend doing private shows. My stomach twisted. Private shows? She said it casually, like she was reading a grocery list. Men would pay thousands for a girlfriend experience, to pretend she was theirs for a night. $5,000 for dinner and a hotel room, sometimes on the exact nights she told me she was sick or busy with consulting work. Our anniversary dinner she skipped because of food poisoning? That was a booking. The nephew's graduation she missed for a work emergency? Another booking. The promotion party I celebrated alone while she claimed she had a migraine? Also a booking. All neatly documented on her public calendar. A calendar for Crystal Diamond. I couldn't even speak. My voice cracked when I finally whispered, why? She shrugged, grabbed her keys, and tossed out 2 words that broke me completely. Because I could. Then she dropped another bomb. The house? The one I'd been pouring my time, money, and sweat into for years? It was in her name now. That refinancing paperwork she'd convinced me to sign 6 months ago, she'd taken me off the deed entirely. And just like that, she said she had a shoot downtown at the Marriott. Told me she needed me out by the weekend so she could turn our basement into her studio. She smirked at me from the doorway, scrolling through her phone. Oh, by the way, she added without even looking up, you should probably get tested. The clinic on 3rd Street takes walk-ins. Mention my name, you'll even get a discount. The door slammed. I watched her tail lights vanish around the corner. My body refused to move. The shattered plate and drying eggs were still on the floor. My knees buckled and I collapsed right there, jeans soaking up the mess. For a long time I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything but stare at the empty kitchen that no longer felt like my home. Eventually, my hands found my phone. I started taking pictures of the broken plate, the mug, the refinancing documents I dug from the filing cabinet. My signature mocked me from the page. When I opened our bank account, my stomach dropped again. $12.37. Yesterday, it had been over $800. She must have drained it that morning, right before walking out the door. I shuffled through the stack of bills on the counter, electricity, water, gas, all stamped with bright red final notice. She hadn't paid a thing in months. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor. Where are you? I looked at the clock. I was already 20 minutes late. I typed back, family emergency. His reply was instant, you're out of sick days. Any time off is unpaid. Unpaid. And I had $12 to my name. It took me 10 more minutes before my legs would even hold me up again. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just betrayal. This was annihilation. I drove to the warehouse on autopilot, barely aware of the roads passing under my tires. The whole trip was a blur, like I was trapped inside someone else's body. By the time I clocked in, I couldn't even remember the drive. That morning shift dragged by like molasses. Tasks I'd been doing for years, muscle memory stuff I could normally handle half asleep, I was screwing them up. Mislabeling boxes, fumbling paperwork, dropping things. My supervisor's eyes kept flicking toward me with that look, that quiet warning. But he didn't say a word yet. By lunch, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I found Ivan in the break room, unwrapping a sandwich. I sat across from him, and the second he saw my face, he set his food down. His eyes went wide. Man, what happened? And then it all came spilling out. Diana. Crystal Diamond. The offshore accounts. The house. Every ugly, humiliating detail. I was half whispering, half rambling, the words tumbling out so fast I could barely breathe. When I finally stopped, Ivan just stared at me, mouth hanging open like I'd been speaking another language. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he said, "You can crash on my couch. As long as you need." I almost lost it right there in front of him. The relief hit so hard I felt my throat close up. My vision blurred and I had to swallow back the burn in my chest. Ivan gave me this awkward pat on the shoulder, like he wasn't sure how to comfort me. "My girlfriend might not love it," he added with a weak laugh, "but she'll get it." I wanted to hug him. Instead, I just nodded, because if I said one more word, I would have broken down in that break room. The rest of my shift vanished in a haze. Trucks, pallets, paperwork, just noise in the background while the same thought kept looping in my head. 3 days. Where the hell am I going to be sleeping in 3 days? After clocking out, I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The 3rd Street clinic Diana had mentioned wasn't far. 15 minutes. I couldn't stop replaying her parting words, the casual cruelty in her voice. "You should probably get tested." So I drove. The waiting room was packed. Every single person in there staring down at their phones, avoiding each other's eyes. A teenager with headphones. An old man fiddling with his watch. And me sitting in the middle, trying not to look like my whole world was collapsing. At the desk, I gave my insurance card. The receptionist asked whose plan it was under. "Diana's," I said. And that's when everything shifted. She froze, looked up at me with this strange pity, her voice softening. "We'll call you back soon. Have a seat." That look, like she knew. Like half the city already knew. 2 hours crawled by before they finally called me back. A nurse drew my blood, handed me a cup. I went through the motions, numb. She told me results would take 3 to 5 days. 3 to 5 days of hell. I walked out of there branded, like everyone in the world could see the shame stamped across my forehead. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, the sun had gone down. Diana's car wasn't there. Probably off at another hotel, another shoot. I heated a can of soup and ate it standing at the counter, because sitting at the table felt too normal, too much like we were still a couple. At 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text from her. "Are you still at the house?" No concern. No emotion. Just words, like she was asking if I'd remembered to pick up groceries. I typed back, "Yes. I'll be out by Saturday like you wanted." Her reply came instantly. A thumbs up emoji. A damn thumbs up. 3 years of marriage, thousands of lies, and that's what I got. I couldn't bring myself to step into our bedroom. The whole room reeked of her perfume, the expensive kind she'd wear to her so-called consulting meetings. The smell hit me like a punch, twisting my stomach. Instead, I grabbed an old blanket from the closet and made a nest on the couch. The ceiling stain above me stared back like some ugly reminder of all the things I'd been planning to fix. Except now, it wasn't mine to fix. It was hers. Or Crystal's. Whoever she was. I lay there wide awake until 3 in the morning, my brain tearing through every memory like an investigator at a crime scene. What had I missed? How many red flags had I ignored? When Friday morning came, I couldn't face work. I called in sick, even knowing it meant losing a day's pay, money I desperately needed. But I had to do something, anything, that made me feel like I wasn't just letting her destroy me. So I opened my laptop and started searching tenant rights. Page after page of legal jargon, my eyes burning. Even without being on the deed, I might still have rights as an established tenant. There was a legal aid clinic downtown that offered free consultations. The earliest appointment? 3 weeks out. Way too late to stop her from kicking me out. Still, I booked it. Because it was something. And something was better than nothing. Then I dug into the filing cabinet. Pulled every bank statement I could find. Every receipt. I started building a spreadsheet, line by line, proof of everything I'd poured into that house over 3 years. Mortgage payments, $18,000. Utilities, $11,000. Home repairs, another $13,000, water heater, roof patch, furnace repair, driveway ceiling, bathroom tiles I laid myself. $42,000. My money. My sweat. My life. All traceable, all documented. It had to mean something in court. By the time my alarm went off the next morning for work, my eyes were bloodshot, but the spreadsheet was saved 3 different ways and emailed to myself. At the warehouse, exhaustion was eating me alive. My hands weren't steady. I tipped over a stack of boxes with the forklift, loaded the wrong shipment, botched the inventory. Strike after strike. After lunch, my supervisor called me into his office. "Shut the door. You okay?" He asked quietly. "At home, I mean." I sat there, staring at my hands. "I'm going through a divorce. I've got to move out by the weekend." He nodded slowly, rubbing his temple. "I get it. But you need to focus. Mistakes like this cost money. I promised him I'd pull it together. Walked back out onto the floor and forced myself to slow down. Double-check every pallet, every label, every entry. Because if I lost this job too, then I'd really have nothing left. When I pulled into the driveway that night, my stomach dropped. Diana's car was there, but parked right beside it was a white van I didn't recognize. My pulse kicked up instantly. I stepped inside and found Diana in the living room, smiling like a hostess at some business mixer. Two guys I'd never seen before were lugging in cases of equipment, cameras, tripods, light rigs. "These are my colleagues," she said smoothly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Colleagues. Right. They didn't even bother pretending otherwise as they headed straight for the basement. A few minutes later, I heard drills chewing into the walls, furniture scraping across the floor, voices echoing up through the vents. They were turning my house into her studio while I stood in the kitchen reheating pasta that tasted like cardboard. I ate it leaning against the counter, listening to their footsteps pounding above my head until nearly midnight. Every thud was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. Saturday morning, I was at the clinic before it even opened. Same worn-out chairs. Same hollow silence of people refusing to meet each other's eyes. After an hour, they finally called me back. A woman named Gabriella came in with my results. Clipboard in hand, voice calm but clinical. "You're negative for everything at this time," she said. Relief crashed over me for about 3 seconds. Then she kept talking. "But some infections have window periods. You'll need to retest in 3 months. 3 more months of not knowing. 3 months of doubt rotting in the back of my head." She handed me a packet of papers about safe practices and exposure risks. I asked what the odds were that something would show up later. She gave me the kind of careful, measured answer that meant, "It's possible." I didn't explain. Couldn't. I just nodded and walked out with the papers clutched in my hand like a scarlet letter. Monday, I cornered my supervisor on break. Asked if I could pick up more shifts, anything extra. I needed money for a deposit fast. He shook his head. Business was slow. Overtime cut. He promised to let me know if something opened up, but it was clear, the timing couldn't be worse. That afternoon, desperation had me calling title companies about the refinancing Diana pushed on me 6 months ago. The first 2 wouldn't even give me the time of day, confidential information since I wasn't on the deed. The third was polite but firm. Without a lawyer, there was nothing they could do for me. Tuesday morning, I tried the bank directly. After being bounced around to 4 different people, someone finally confirmed it. My name was gone. Legally, the house was hers. My signature was right there on the documents. Binding. Final. Can I contest it? I asked, already knowing the answer. You'd have to speak with an attorney, sir. We can't provide legal advice. Each call left me feeling smaller, more cornered. By Wednesday, I was burning through law offices like lottery tickets. Half wanted money just to talk to me. Finally, Bryce Myers' office picked up. They had an opening Monday. The receptionist casually dropped the number, $5,000 retainer. I almost hung up. But I forced myself to keep the appointment. Maybe they'd let me pay in pieces. Maybe. By Friday, I was desperate enough to try Diana's laptop while she was out. She'd changed every password. Locked me out completely. But her site, the Crystal Diamond site, was still on my phone. The calendar showed 3 appointments booked for that weekend. 3 men. 3 stacks of money that dwarfed my monthly paycheck. Sunday night, she waltzed in with takeout from the Chinese place we used to treat ourselves to for anniversaries. She unpacked cartons like nothing was wrong. "Want to eat with me?" she asked casually. I stayed on the couch. My chest burned. She shrugged. "House'll be all mine tomorrow anyway." She sat at our table, scrolling through her phone, laughing at texts while noodles dangled from her chopsticks. The normalcy of it was almost more brutal than if she'd screamed in my face. Monday came and I dragged myself into Bryce Myers' office. A strip mall law firm between a nail salon and a payday loan place. Yeah, confidence-inspiring. Bryce couldn't have been more than 30, wearing a wrinkled suit that looked borrowed. His laptop hinge was literally taped together. Still, he listened. Took notes. Then leaned back and gave me the truth. Because Diana had the deed, I was basically screwed. We could fight for marital assets, maybe argue deception, but it would take months. Years. And money I didn't have. When I started to leave, he stopped me. Offered to take the case for $2,500 down, with monthly payments. He said he knew what it felt like to lose everything. And I believed him. So I signed. Even though I'd have to sell more of my father's things just to cover it, I signed. He slid me a yellow legal pad and told me to list every asset, every debt. The page looked pitiful when I was done. 2 maxed out credit cards. An ancient Honda on its last legs. Some thrift store furniture. Meanwhile, Diana had siphoned off nearly $500,000 into accounts I couldn't touch. Every line on that list drove the knife deeper. She hadn't just left me with nothing. She'd made sure of it. Bryce told me to start pulling every bank statement from the past 3 years. Build my case brick by brick. That evening, I found Ivan in the parking lot before our shift. "Is your couch still open?" I asked, voice low. "Because Diana wants me out tonight." He didn't hesitate. "Yeah. Let's move your stuff after work." The hours crawled by. When 5 o'clock hit, Ivan followed me home. Diana was already waiting in the doorway, arms crossed, expression smug. She reminded me, loudly, that anything bought for the house stayed in the house. Even the microwave I'd bought with birthday money. She filmed us the entire time with her phone, narrating like I was some petty thief. Ivan and I carried out 3 boxes. That was all I had left after 7 years of marriage. 1 box of clothes. 1 of my father's tools. 1 of books and papers. 3 boxes. That was it. We drove in silence to Ivan's apartment. His girlfriend's face said everything when we walked in. She'd agreed to 2 weeks, no more. I thanked her, swore I'd be gone as soon as possible. That night, I curled up on their couch with a blanket she handed me like it was charity. And for the first time, it sank in. Diana still had the house. The money. The basement filled with cameras and lights. And me? I had 3 boxes and a borrowed couch. Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed before the sun was even up. 6:30 a.m. A message from Diana. She'd already changed all the locks. Attached was a photo of shiny new deadbolts, thick black metal ones, nicer than anything we'd ever owned together in 7 years of marriage. The caption, "Don't come back. If I see you near the property, I'll call the cops." That was it. No pretense left. I was officially homeless except for Ivan's couch. I texted her back, asking if I could at least get my father's old workbench from the garage. Her reply came fast. "It's attached to the house. It stays." It was so perfectly cruel I had to sit down. Every move she made was like it had been designed to strip away one more piece of me. Wednesday, I had to leave work halfway through my shift to meet a police officer at the house. Civil standby, they called it. He looked annoyed before we even started, glancing at his watch every other minute. Diana let us in with a smirk, camera already rolling on her phone. Every step I took, she narrated like I was a burglar. I grabbed what little was left, my dad's hand tools, a few papers I couldn't risk losing. My birth certificate. Social security card. Diana tried to argue even those weren't mine, but the officer shut her down. 20 minutes and it felt like 20 hours. Walking through that house, hearing her heels clicking behind me, her phone pointed at my back, it was torture. Ivan's apartment was cramped, but it beat sleeping in my car. His girlfriend barely spoke to me, retreating to their bedroom most nights to avoid me. I understood. Who wants a stranger with 3 cardboard boxes camped on their couch? So I made myself useful. Bought groceries, scrubbed the bathroom until it smelled like bleach, vacuumed the floors every day. Ivan told me I didn't need to, but I couldn't just sit there, eating their food and taking up space, without giving something back. Thursday, an email popped up during my shift. Results from the clinic, negative. For now. Relief surged through me until the phone rang an hour later. Gabriella from the clinic. Calm, professional voice. Some infections take longer to show up. You'll need to come back in 12 weeks. 3 months. 3 months of waiting, wondering, second-guessing every headache, every ache in my body. By Friday, I cornered my supervisor again, practically begging for steadier hours. Apartments wanted proof of income, and my paychecks had been all over the place. He sighed, said he'd try, but business was slow. No guarantees. Word had gotten around the warehouse by then. People whispered, stared. Some offered pity beers after work, but I couldn't afford a round of cheap draft, let alone pretend to be okay. The following week, Bryce officially filed the divorce papers. He warned me Diana would drag her feet, stall, twist the knife any way she could. She had money for a long, bloody legal fight. I didn't. The process server tried 3 times to deliver the papers. She never answered, even with her car in the driveway. Meanwhile, her Instagram showed selfies from inside the house. Laughing. Posing. Drinking wine under my roof while she pretended she wasn't home. Games. Always games. Tuesday, my phone went dark at work. Wouldn't even power on. I checked the carrier site on a coworker's computer. Account terminated by the primary holder. Diana. She'd cut my line like it was nothing. That night, I walked into a dingy strip mall phone store and bought the cheapest prepaid flip phone they had. $30. It looked like something from a museum. Every text cost 10 cents and I had to type each word with the number pad, like it was 2005 again. My first message was to Ivan. Then my supervisor. Then my mom. She called me back immediately crying, saying she never trusted Diana. That was a lie, but I let her rewrite history. If it made her feel better, fine. I didn't have the strength to argue. The next morning, I noticed a flyer in the break room, Employee Assistance Program. Free counseling, 3 sessions. I called during lunch. The woman on the phone sounded half asleep until I explained. My wife was living a double life as an adult entertainer. Her voice sharpened. Suddenly she had openings that week. That first session was in a tiny office above a dentist, the whole place smelling like mouthwash. The therapist looked barely out of school. She kept writing notes, eyes wide as I laid everything out. She asked how I felt. Over and over. I didn't want to talk about feelings. I wanted someone to tell me how to survive. But I used the whole 50 minutes anyway, just unloading. She looked relieved when the timer went off, scheduling the next session like she couldn't wait to hand me off. Thursday, Bryce called with a lead. A property lawyer, Damon Monontoya, willing to review our refinancing for a flat $300. I met him that afternoon. His office was chaos, piles of papers everywhere, like the walls were made of file folders. He dug through my documents with a magnifying glass, muttering, shaking his head. Then he found it. On the refinancing application, Diana had claimed she was the sole owner of the house. 6 months ago. Before divorce was even filed. Fraud. Thin but real. It might give us leverage, Damon said. If we can prove she misrepresented ownership to the bank. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. That night, I made the mistake of looking up her Instagram. Public. Bright. Shiny. That morning she'd posted a photo, yoga in the living room, captioned, living my truth, loving every moment. Comments filled with heart emojis and blind praise. Scrolling deeper, I saw our bedroom, except it wasn't ours anymore. Purple paint, crystal lamps, silk curtains. Professional portraits of her cropped into art prints. Videos of her cooking in copper pots we could never afford, preaching self-care, selling a dream life built on lies. I wanted to scream the truth in the comments, expose everything. But Bryce had been clear, keep quiet. Don't jeopardize the case. So I sat there, fists clenched, watching strangers cheer for the woman who'd gutted my life. Friday, the process server finally caught her at a downtown coffee shop. She'd been meeting someone, probably another client. He handed her the papers. She laughed. Said she'd been expecting it. Tipped him $20. Even divorce was just a joke to her. That night, my new flip phone started buzzing at midnight. Diana's number. Where's the water shut-off valve? At 2 a.m., thermostat isn't working. At 3:30, how do you reset the garage door? Each message yanked me out of a shallow, restless sleep on Ivan's couch. I didn't answer a single one. Bryce's warning echoed in my head, no communication. Besides, she wanted the house so badly. She could figure out how to run it herself. The messages kept coming all weekend. Each one angrier than the last. Saturday morning, I loaded my father's tools into the back of Ivan's truck. Each piece clanged against the metal bed, and with every sound it felt like something inside me broke a little more. These weren't just tools, they were pieces of my father's life, passed down to me like sacred relics. His 1978 socket set, the same one he used to rebuild engines in our garage. The drill press he'd bought the year I was born. The hand planes he'd inherited from his father before him. Generations of sweat and history. But Bryce needed the retainer, and without money I had no case. The first pawn shop barely looked at me before offering $500 for the lot. The guy smirked like he was doing me a favor. I walked out without a word. The second shop gave me $1,200, which was better, but still an insult. The third place, an old man with grease-stained hands and eyes that lit up when he recognized what I'd brought, took the time to test each tool. He gave me $2,000 in cash laid out in neat stacks. 90 days to buy him back, he said gently. We both knew that wasn't happening. I drove away with the envelope heavy in my pocket and a hollow pit in my chest. Monday, Bryce filed subpoenas for Diana's bank records and the payment history from the Crystal Diamond site. Predictably, her lawyer fired back immediately, claiming it was an invasion of privacy and a threat to her business interests. Every motion they filed was another bill on my end. Bryce warned me his reduced fee wouldn't stretch forever. Diana's team knew exactly how to bleed me dry. And then there were the texts. The water shutoff. The thermostat. The garage door. Half the time I wondered if she really didn't know how her own house worked, or if it was just bait, a trap to get me to break the no-contact rule. The counseling sessions, they helped in ways I didn't expect. The young therapist still looked like she wanted to crawl out of the room whenever I talked, but she pushed me to face things I'd buried. The business trips that made no sense. The sale racks that somehow produced designer dresses. The way she guarded her phone like it held nuclear codes. I hadn't missed the signs. I'd chosen not to see them. Because if I did, I'd have had to admit my whole marriage was a fraud. She mentioned support groups for betrayed spouses. I wasn't ready for that. Sitting in a circle talking about how my wife had destroyed me? No thanks. 3 hours of therapy hadn't even scratched the surface of the humiliation. Sunday night, Ivan's girlfriend finally sat me down at their kitchen table. Ivan sat beside her, shifting uncomfortably like he already knew what was coming. You can't stay here forever, she said. 2 weeks. That was the deadline. I nodded, tried to look understanding, but inside I was panicking. Deposits, credit checks, proof of income, I didn't have any of it. Monday at work, I started combing through apartment listings on my lunch break. Anything with no credit check was either in a neighborhood you didn't survive long in, or wanted $3,000 up front for a roach-infested shoebox. 11 days until I was on the street. That same day, my supervisor caught me staring at my phone and asked if I'd consider switching to nights. $2 more an hour. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. The first night shift was brutal. 11 at night until 7:30 in the morning, my body begging for sleep at the wrong times. But those 16 extra bucks a shift added up to $400 more a month. $400 closer to a deposit. The warehouse was eerie at night, quiet, hollow. Just me, the hum of forklifts, and too much time to think about Diana laughing with strangers while I sweated in the dark. Most mornings, I dragged myself back to Ivan's couch while construction crews next door hammered and drilled, keeping me from getting more than a few restless hours of sleep. Midweek, I drove past the house to pick up stray mail. My stomach clenched when I saw it. Security cameras. Motion sensor floodlights. Every corner fortified like a fortress. She was protecting the palace she'd stolen, while I couldn't even secure a place to sleep. I sat in my car, staring at the paint job I'd finished last summer, the flowers I'd planted, the driveway I'd patched with my own hands. Something inside me snapped. I turned the corner, parked where no one could see me, and screamed until my throat burned raw and my voice cracked into silence. 2 weeks later, the first court hearing finally came. Temporary orders. I showed up in my only decent shirt. Diana walked in wearing designer clothes I didn't even recognize. Her lawyer was polished, sharp suit, leather briefcase. Bryce walked in with folders held together by rubber bands. The judge looked like she'd already had enough before we even started. Diana's lawyer claimed she had no steady income, just modest investments, conveniently leaving out the empire she'd built as Crystal Diamond. The judge wasn't buying it, I could tell, but she said she needed more evidence before issuing orders. 60 more days. Mediation in the meantime. 60 days might as well have been 60 years. After court, Bryce pulled me aside. His voice was low, heavy. We may need to think about settlement instead of trial. Trials cost tens of thousands. With her offshore accounts, she can outspend us until there's nothing left. I wanted to scream. To fight. To drag her through the mud the way she'd done to me. But the numbers didn't lie. If I didn't settle, I could end up broke and empty-handed. That night, I found one sliver of control. Diana had forgotten to take me off our shared car insurance. After 7 years, my name was still on the policy. I called the company, canceled it effective immediately. An hour later, the text started. First confused, then furious, then threatening. You're pathetic. This proves I was right to cut you out. I didn't care. Not anymore. The next morning, I opened my own bank account for the first time since we'd merged everything years ago. The banker asked about financial goals, savings plans, retirement. I almost laughed in her face. My only goal was surviving the week. Maybe, if I was lucky, scraping together enough for a key to a door that locked behind me. She handed me glossy pamphlets about investments and retirement planning. I threw them in the trash on my way out. Because right now, my entire future fit in 3 cardboard boxes, and the hope that one day I'd claw my way out of this mess. 3 days later, I opened my phone and nearly dropped it. Diana had posted a glossy video tour of our house, only now she was calling it her studio. The basement, where we used to keep boxes of Christmas decorations and the old recliner her uncle gave us, was gone. In its place, high-end lights, cameras on tripods, soundproofing on the walls. She panned the camera around like a proud businesswoman showing off her empire. The video blew up, hundreds of likes, comments flooding in. People praising her, calling her inspiring, asking how they could start their own business. Mutual friends even started texting me. What happened between you two? Why aren't you living there anymore? I wanted to scream the truth. I wanted to blast out every filthy detail about Crystal Diamond, about the lies, about the $600,000 she'd hidden. But Bryce's voice echoed in my head, anything you say in public can hurt the case. Don't look vindictive. So I swallowed it. Replied with one line, we're getting divorced. And left it at that while she played the victim online. Ivan, trying to help, found an apartment listing in a neighborhood people usually avoided after dark. No credit check, no massive deposit. We drove over. The building was ancient, hallways stinking of cigarettes and something worse I couldn't identify. The studio apartment was barely bigger than a closet. Water stains spread across the ceiling, the kitchen nothing more than a hot plate and a mini fridge shoved into a corner. $800 a month, the landlord said, leaning against his car in the parking lot where he apparently ran the entire building. First month cash and you can move in tonight. It was depressing. It was humiliating. But it was mine. Ivan helped me load my 3 boxes into his truck and drop them off. His girlfriend didn't say much, her sigh of relief said it all. The walls in the new place were thin. Too thin. I could hear every fight, every TV show, every argument in the apartments next to me. But when I shut my own door, turned the lock and slid the bolt into place, it was the first door in months that was actually mine. 2 days after moving in, the clinic called. A reminder for my 3-month follow-up. The same waiting room. The same plastic chairs. The same silence thick with shame as everyone stared at their phones, pretending not to notice each other. Some of the same faces I remembered from before. Gabriella called me back after 40 minutes. Drew my blood, made small talk about the weather, handed me another set of pamphlets. Results in a week, she said. Call if you notice symptoms before then. I didn't. But that didn't stop the anxiety from gnawing at me, every second of every day. A week later, Bryce called while I was on break at the warehouse. The records are in. I clocked out early, heart pounding as I drove to his office. When I walked in, a stack of papers sat on his desk, thicker than a phone book. Every page full of numbers that made my stomach turn. Bryce had already combed through it, yellow highlighter and sticky notes marking the damning details. Total income, $600,000. Not $470. $600. Diana had lied even about that, hiding an extra $130,000 in places we'd probably never touch. The booking logs listed hotel after hotel, private sessions scheduled during times she told me she was at yoga, visiting her sister, or stuck in traffic. Every lie we lived through had a $sign attached. Bryce explained the offshore accounts would cost more to chase than we'd ever recover. Diana had picked banks and countries that specialized in hiding money. What we could go after was the money in U.S. banks, and that was still enough to fight over. Mediation was set for Tuesday. I showed up in my only suit, the one I'd bought years ago for job interviews that no longer fit right across the shoulders. Diana walked in dressed like royalty, designer clothes that probably cost more than my car. Her attorney carried a leather briefcase that screamed money. We sat at opposite ends of a long conference table while the mediator explained the rules. Diana's lawyer went first. His generous offer? $20,000 if I walked away, signed everything, and shut up forever. I felt heat rising in my chest, my fists curling under the table. I wanted to shout about the 3 years I lived on ramen while she raked in $20,000 a month. But Bryce's coaching kept me still. He calmly countered, half the house value plus $100,000 of her proven earnings. Diana laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a cold, sharp bark that made my skin crawl. I'd rather pay my lawyers every penny than give him that. 3 hours dragged by, back and forth, numbers tossed across the table like knives. Eventually she nodded, reluctant but smug. $60,000 paid over 2 years in monthly installments. Unfair. Miserable. But survivable. I signed. It felt like defeat but also like release. 2 weeks later, the first payment hit my brand new bank account. I used it immediately to put a deposit down on a better place. Still small. Still modest. But it was in a safer neighborhood, where sirens didn't scream every night. The property manager ran my credit, gave me a look when he saw the mess, but didn't ask questions. Didn't dig. Just handed me the lease. The new apartment had real kitchen cabinets. A window with trees outside instead of a cracked parking lot. Moving day? 3 boxes and a cheap air mattress. That was it. But as I stood there in the empty living room, sunlight filtering through the blinds, I realized something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The final test. 3 months after that first humiliating morning at the clinic, I found myself back in the same waiting room, the same hard plastic chairs, the same heavy silence where nobody made eye contact. My leg wouldn't stop bouncing, my palms slick with sweat. Every worst-case scenario I'd tortured myself with for weeks pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. Gabriella finally called my name. She greeted me with the same calm professionalism, her voice steady as she slid the tourniquet on my arm and drew the blood. She didn't ask questions, didn't look at me with pity, just did her job. I appreciated that more than I could say. A week later, my phone rang. Her voice on the line. All tests came back negative. I had to sit down. My knees simply gave out. Relief hit me so hard I felt dizzy, lightheaded, like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. Gabriella told me I was lucky, reminded me to be more careful with partners in the future. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, that I couldn't imagine having a partner again anytime soon. Maybe ever. The divorce was finalized a month after mediation. I sat in the courtroom, staring at the back of Diana's head while the judge flipped through papers like it was just another item on his to-do list. He signed the decree without even glancing up. Just like that, it was over. Diana walked away with the house and most of the money she'd hidden. I walked away with $60,000 spread out over 2 years and my freedom. It wasn't justice. Not even close. But it was closure. A legal document that said I'd never have to call her my wife again. 3 months after my world detonated in that kitchen, I stood in my tiny one-bedroom apartment unpacking the first real belongings I'd bought for myself. A bed frame so I didn't have to wake up on an air mattress that deflated halfway through the night. A couch from the thrift store. A second-hand table with mismatched chairs. Real plates and cups instead of paper ones. It was humble. It was small. But it was mine. The settlement money wasn't enough to erase the years of lies or bring back what I'd lost. It never could. But it was a start. A foundation. Something real. Diana, no Crystal Diamond, was still out there, building her empire, posting curated snapshots of her life online. Ivan told me she had thousands of followers cheering her on, oblivious to the wreckage she'd left behind. And me? I clocked into the warehouse at 11 p.m. and worked until the sun came up, every shift leaving my body aching, but the pay a little steadier now with nights. Not glamorous. Not enviable. But honest. For the first time in years, I was building something that wasn't a lie. Something that was truly mine. I spent years making sure my brother couldn't survive without me, and when he finally begged me to stop, I did. The truth is, I liked watching him fall apart without me. And now he knows it. If this made your day easier, make mine better with a quick like and subscribe. Thank you. My brother told me, loud and clear, that he didn't need me fixing his problems anymore. He said it at his own 30th birthday party of all places. So when the day came that his son's face started swelling from an allergic reaction, and he called me in a blind panic about how to use the EpiPen, I reminded him of his little speech. Because wasn't that what he wanted? For me to stop saving him? Let me take you back. I'd spent years looking out for my younger brother Damien. Bailing him out. Covering his mistakes. Making sure he stayed afloat. And then, on the rooftop bar I had rented for his milestone birthday, he snapped. He raised his glass, swaying just a little from the whiskey, and practically shouted, "You need to stop fixing everything for me." His voice carried across the entire table, silencing the laughter, cutting through the clinking of glasses. Everyone stared. "I'm not helpless," he spat, eyes locked on me. "Stop acting like I need you to solve all my problems." I was literally holding the keys to the condo I had bought him, where he'd been crashing rent-free for 6 months. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as my mom gasped. But Damien wasn't done. "This is my birthday and I'm sick of it." Sick of hearing, "Kevin did this, Kevin paid for that, Kevin swoops in to save the day." Enough. He slammed back the rest of his drink. "For once in your life, stop playing the hero." The table went dead quiet. I slowly slid those condo keys into my pocket and said calmly, "You're right. I'll stop fixing things for you completely." His face flickered with surprise, but then he smiled faintly, almost relieved. "Finally. Thank you." That was the moment everything changed. The very next morning, there was a knock on my door. Damien stood there holding a half-finished resume. "Hey, can you proofread this? That marketing director position closes Friday." I leaned against the frame. "That sounds like me fixing your job situation. I don't do that anymore." "What? I just need your help editing, not." "You said you don't need me solving your problems," I reminded him. "That's literally what this is, bro." He blinked confused, then walked away. He lasted 4 days. 4. That Saturday, my phone buzzed at 9 a.m. "Hey, are you free to watch Archie tonight? Just for a few hours." I laughed. "That's a Kevin saves the day situation. But that show's been canceled, remember? Come on, it's just for tonight. Ask Mom. Or a neighbor." Turns out he didn't find anyone. I know because Mom blew up my phone the next morning, furious that I didn't step in. But I reminded her, we had to respect Damien's boundaries. Then came the rent. The leasing office called me directly since I was the guarantor. "He's nearly 3 months behind," they warned. "This could end in eviction." "Oh, I'm sure that's a mistake," I told them. "Damien doesn't need me fixing his problems anymore." He made that abundantly clear. Weeks later, I found out he pawned Lucy's wedding ring just to scrape by. 2 months after that, Lucy, his wife, needed emergency gallbladder surgery. She called me from the hospital, her voice thin from pain meds. "The deductible's $8,000, she whispered. I could picture her clutching the phone, tears slipping down her cheeks. This was the same woman whose IVF I'd quietly covered before. But I just reminded her of Damien's speech. He said me helping makes him feel helpless. I'm just trying to be a good big brother. Click. She hung up. Later, I heard she maxed out 3 credit cards. All I wanted was one thing, an apology. Some acknowledgement. Just a simple, thank you for everything you've done. But it never came. Instead, 3 weeks later, I got a call from an unfamiliar Chicago number. It was a hiring manager. Damien had listed me as his primary reference for a VP of marketing job. I said flatly, I can't discuss his qualifications. He told me to stop fixing his life. But you're his reference? The manager asked, confused. I'm respecting his wishes. That job slipped through his fingers. And something inside him broke. He drank more. He called less. Then at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, the county jail called. Damien had been picked up for a DUI after a company happy hour. $5,000 cash bail. I chuckled bitterly. I'd love to help, but that would be classic Kevin saves the day. And you said we're all sick of it, remember? 5 days. That's how long he sat in lockup before a public defender found a bondsman. His mugshot? All over the local blog. I thought maybe he'd finally learned. But I was wrong. Weeks passed in silence. Then one night at 7 p.m. my phone rang. On the other end I heard frantic breathing. Damien's voice, choked with panic. Kevin, Archie's face is swelling. I don't know how to use the EpiPen. My stomach dropped. But my words came out cold. That would be fixing your emergency. And you don't need me fixing everything. He was sobbing, fumbling, Archie wheezing in the background. Kevin, please, I'm sorry. Is that what you wanted? I'm sorry. For everything, the birthday, for being ungrateful, for please, he's my son. I need you. His voice cracked. I've always needed you. By then, I'd already dialed 911 on my work phone. Sirens were en route. The EpiPen's in the blue pocket of the diaper bag, I finally said. Orange tip on his thigh, hold for 10 seconds. Keep him upright. Keep talking to him. How do you? I called them the second you called me, I whispered. I'm in the driveway. There was silence. Then Damien's broken voice, you're here. I exhaled. I'm always here, you idiot. Even when you don't want me to be. I paused. Then added, oh, and that VP job? The one you wanted? It's mine now. I could hear Archie crying in the background as the ambulance doors flew open and paramedics stormed inside. Lucy, shirt stained with Archie's vomit, climbed in after them without sparing me a glance. Damien just stared, frozen in the doorway, while the realization hit him, I'd taken the future he thought would save him. At the hospital, the waiting room buzzed with families, but they took Archie straight back. Lucy stormed out 20 minutes later, eyes blazing. You let him panic, she hissed, before you told him about the EpiPen? And you took his job? This is what you call respecting boundaries. Her voice cracked. You're punishing a child because his dad hurt your feelings. Damien didn't look up. Just sat there, staring at his hands. An hour later, the doctor told us Archie was stable, but they'd keep him for observation. Lucy went back inside without another word. Damien walked past me out the doors without saying a thing. I sat alone another hour before finally driving home. The next morning, Mom's number lit up my phone at 6 a.m. She didn't stop calling until I picked up at 9. This has gone too far, Kevin. He gets it, okay? He understands now what you've done for him. I told her calmly, I'm just doing what Damien asked. Respecting his boundaries. Don't give me that, she snapped. You're being cruel and you know it. Your father would be ashamed of you. That one cut deep. Maybe you should stop enabling him too, Mom, I said. Let him figure things out like he wanted. She hung up on me. And I sat there, wondering if I was finally the villain in this story, or just the brother who finally stopped saving the day. Monday morning, I stepped into the glass tower of my new office building downtown, polished marble floors echoing under my shoes. It smelled like fresh coffee and expensive perfume. My first day as vice president of marketing. In the conference room, Juliet Daniels was already waiting. Impeccably dressed, not a hair out of place, with my onboarding packet neatly stacked in front of her. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I heard about your brother during the hiring process, she said bluntly, eyes sharp. I need to be clear, your personal drama can't bleed into this job. We hired you for results, not baggage. Her tone made my stomach tighten. I forced a confident smile. It won't be an issue. My family life and my work life are completely separate. Good. She didn't soften. Because the last VP let their divorce destroy their performance. That can't happen again. She slid a folder toward me. Here's your first assignment. A campaign in crisis. Fix it. I spent the week drowning in spreadsheets, pitch decks, and late nights, determined to prove myself. For once, I thought I was doing something that had nothing to do with Damien. But Thursday morning, Lucy's name lit up my phone. Damon's arraignment is next week. He can't find a lawyer who takes payments. 3 firms turned him down. He needs $5,000 just for the retainer. I stared at the text, then set my phone down without responding. He ended up with a frazzled public defender, the kind juggling 40 cases at once. 10 minutes to skim the file, if that. My brother's future decided in less time than a coffee break. 2 weeks later, Lucy's voice cracked through the phone, sobbing. The hospital reported Archie's emergency. And with Damien's arrest. CPS is involved. They're saying his drinking puts Archie at risk. Kevin, we could lose him. We could lose our son. Her desperation twisted something inside me, but I swallowed it down. Then Damien needs to get sober. That's on him, not me. You're a monster, she whispered. And the line went dead. The very next day, a woman named Daphne Clean called. CPS intake worker. Her voice was polite but all business. We'll need to schedule a home visit. And verify that all caregivers know how to use an EpiPen. You're listed as an emergency contact for Archie, so we'll need to confirm you're trained. That stopped me cold. This wasn't just Damien's mess anymore. If he spiraled, if CPS decided he was unfit, Archie could end up in foster care. Friday night, 10 o'clock sharp, there was a knock at my door. Damien. He looked wrecked. Hair greasy, eyes bloodshot, clothes wrinkled like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't even try to come inside, just sat on my porch steps. I need to apologize, he said softly. Not that panic apology from the other night. A real one. He started talking, and for 20 minutes he poured it all out. How he'd been jealous his entire life. How he'd resented me for being successful while he felt like he was drowning. How the drinking got worse every time he compared himself to me. Finally, his voice broke. What would it take, Kev? To fix this? To fix us? I looked at him long and hard. First, you get sober. No excuses. Second, you make a repayment plan. For everything I've covered for you over the years. $200,000. His face drained of color. Jesus, 200 grand? Yes. My voice was steady. That's the reality. He sat there in shock, then gave a tiny nod. I'll try. Monday's staff meeting at work was brutal. I almost let myself brag about beating out 3 internal candidates for my new role, but Juliet shut me down afterward. You need to stop focusing on how you got here, she said, cutting to the bone. What matters now is delivery. Don't waste my time with ego. Her words stung, but she was right. My ego wasn't just ruining family relationships, it was bleeding into my career. That afternoon, another text from Lucy. The collection agencies are calling about my gallbladder surgery. $8,000 plus penalties. Do you know any resources for medical debt? Notice how carefully she worded it. Not asking directly for money, but begging between the lines. I sent her links to 3 legitimate relief programs. Resources. Tools. Anything but cash. Because I knew I could wipe it all clean with one phone call to my bank. But I didn't. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table that night with a blank Excel sheet and a stack of old bank statements. And I started typing. Every transfer. Every receipt. Every dollar I'd spent on Damien since college. The condo down payment, $60,000. IVF treatments across 3 cycles, $38,000. Bail, rent, car repairs, groceries, utilities, medical bills. Line after line, memory after memory. When I hit the total, my hands shook. $212,000. I printed it. 23 pages, itemized by date and amount. Proof of every time I'd saved the day. The next morning, I drove to Damien's place. He opened the door, eyes hollow, stubble thick, looking years older than he should have. I handed him the stack. What's this? Everything I've spent on you since college. He flipped through the pages, his lips moving as he read the numbers. By the 3rd page, his face went pale. 200,000, he whispered. I didn't flinch. I don't expect it tomorrow. But I need you to acknowledge it. He swallowed hard, nodded, and with a shaking hand, he signed the bottom of the last page. That was Tuesday. By the following Monday, my phone lit up with Mom's number. When I answered, she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Finally, the words tumbled out. She'd found Damien passed out in the garage. An empty whiskey bottle tipped over beside him. His boss had chewed him out earlier that day for missing a deadline, and on his way home, he'd stopped at the liquor store instead of facing it sober. But Lucy hadn't called me. Mom whispered through her tears, "She's done, Kevin. She's done calling you for help." And I realized in that moment how strange the silence was. After years of being their emergency contact, their 24/7 safety net, I wasn't even on speed dial anymore. The house felt too quiet without their chaos pressing in. 3 days later, my phone buzzed, not a call this time, but a text from Damien himself. A screenshot. His insurance had finally approved therapy after months of denials. He'd been matched with someone named Amir Compton. The message was simple, starting next week. Just wanted you to know. No request for gas money. No asking me to pay the copay. Just information. For the first time in years, he'd done something without me. That Thursday, Mom called me again, sobbing into the receiver. Damien called me from the parking lot after his first session, she said. He told Amir everything. She relayed the words Damien had spilled out, how he'd carried jealousy toward me since we were kids. How when Dad walked out, his anger had nowhere to go, but the week Dad left, I got promoted at work, so his fury just turned inward. How every time I bailed him out, it didn't make him feel supported, it made him feel smaller. Amir had told him that what looked like resentment was really shame. Shame for needing help. Shame for never measuring up. Mom's voice cracked. He cried harder than the day your father left. I didn't know what to do with that. Meanwhile, I got another call, this time from a man named Vincent Coffey, one of the attorneys handling Damien's DUI case. He laid it all out plain. An ignition interlock device for 18 months, $70 a month. Mandatory alcohol education classes, 12 sessions at $50 each. State Route 22 insurance that would triple his premiums. Probation fees, $40 monthly. And through it all, Vincent said Damien wasn't asking for me. Instead, he kept asking him, 3 different times, if there were payment plans. Damien was scribbling numbers on a napkin during their meeting. Budgeting. Calculating. For once, he wasn't waiting for me to swoop in. The following Tuesday, CPS arrived. Daphne Klein, clipboard in hand, walking briskly through their house. Her eyes caught everything. Expired EpiPens in the kitchen drawer, 6 months overdue. A liquor cabinet with no lock. No posted emergency action plan. Cleaning supplies sitting under the sink within Archie's reach. Lucy scrambled to explain. Damien got defensive, talking about government overreach, his voice rising with each excuse. But Daphne didn't waver. She handed them a list, her tone firm. You have 2 weeks to correct these issues, or we'll need to consider placement options for Archie. I watched Lucy's face drain of color. Damien's fists clenched at his sides. That Thursday, I showed up at Archie's allergist appointment. I didn't announce myself, just slid into a chair in the back corner. The doctor explained the action plan, her tone stern. Every caregiver must know how to use the EpiPen. When she asked who else looked after Archie, I raised my hand. Damien's jaw tightened. His eyes burned holes into the floor. But Lucy, she mouthed, thank you. The doctor scheduled a training class for the following week. Friday morning, another blow. Their landlord taped an eviction notice right on the front door. 3 months behind on rent plus fees. 30 days to come up with $8,000 or pack up and leave. That night, Damien showed up at my door again. He looked smaller somehow. Defeated. Would you co-sign a lease for us? Somewhere cheaper. His voice was rough, almost pleading. I shook my head. Slowly. He nodded once, lips pressed tight, and left without a fight. But I couldn't shake it. That night, I sat at my desk until 2 a.m. combing through apartment listings. I built a spreadsheet, 12 complexes that accepted bad credit. Monthly costs, deposit amounts, distance to Archie's school. I even added links to food banks, utility assistance, legal aid. At 2 o'clock sharp, I emailed it to him. No subject line. No message. Just the spreadsheet. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Received, thanks. 2 words. But heavy with everything he couldn't say. Sunday dinner at Mom's house was quiet. Too quiet. Archie fussed softly in his high chair, the clink of silverware on plates the only sound. We made it all the way to dessert before Mom cracked. She pushed her pie away and burst into tears. I hate this, she sobbed. I hate watching my boys like this. I miss how things used to be. I set my fork down. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I liked being needed. My voice was flat, almost foreign to my own ears. Mom froze. Damien didn't look up from his plate. Lucy pulled Archie into her arms, holding him closer. I used money to feel necessary, I admitted, each word heavier than the last. Every check I wrote made me feel valuable. The dining room seemed to shrink, air thick with silence. Finally, Damien lifted his eyes, meeting mine. His voice was quiet. I knew that. I hated you for it. But I took the money anyway. Mom reached across the table, her hands trembling, grasping both of ours. My boys, she whispered before breaking down again. Archie started fussing louder and Lucy stood, carrying him outside. The 3 of us stayed there in silence. Surrounded by cold pie, untouched plates, and the unspoken truth of everything we'd done to each other. 3 days after that tense Sunday dinner, I pulled into Mom's driveway and saw Damien's beat-up Honda idling out front. The backseat was piled high with food delivery bags, DoorDash, Uber Eats, you name it. His eyes flicked between the road and his phone, tracking orders like his life depended on each ping. Inside, Lucy had their kitchen table cleared, her designer purse spread out under a lamp like it was on display at a boutique. She was taking pictures, every angle, every detail, for Facebook Marketplace. I checked later. The price started at $800. By Wednesday, it was down to $550. That weekend, Damien picked up double shifts. Friday and Saturday, the busiest nights, when half the city ordered takeout drunk at midnight. He'd leave around 5, come back smelling like greasy fries and cold lo mein after 1 a.m. Lucy sold her wedding jewelry next. Not the ring itself, but everything else. I heard she met strangers in parking lots to hand over gold and silver while Damien watched Archie at home. And through all of this, through the selling, the late nights, the bills, they never called me. For the first time in years, when money ran out, their first move wasn't me. 2 weeks later, the knock came again. Tuesday morning. No warning. 10 o'clock sharp. CPS. Daphne Klein stood at their door, clipboard in hand. Lucy told me later how she and Damien scrambled, EpiPens now mounted in the kitchen, liquor locked in a cabinet, an action plan taped right to the fridge. Daphne checked everything. Tested the lock. Opened drawers. Made notes about cleaning supplies now stored up high. Lucy's hands shook the whole time. Damien stood stiff, jaw tight, like he was daring her to call him unfit. Finally, she closed her folder. The case will stay open. But you're making progress. When the door shut, Lucy locked herself in the bathroom to cry. Damien just sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. That same week, I dropped the ball. A major campaign presentation, my slides only half finished, my phone buzzing nonstop with Mom's texts about Damien, Lucy, CPS. I tried to wing it in the conference room, but stumbled over numbers, skipped key data, forgot the budget breakdown completely. Afterward, Juliet called me into her office. Close the door. I hired you for results, Kevin. Not to watch you unravel like the last guy. The disappointment in her voice cut deeper than any lecture. My stomach sank. My obsession with Damien's mess was now wrecking my own. Thursday, Damien had another therapy session. The only reason I knew was because Mom mentioned it. She said he walked out of the office looking wrecked, but clear somehow. Amir had made him unpack everything. Dad leaving when we were kids. Mom trying to fix everything with casseroles and overcompensation. How I'd stepped into the role of the father he never had. And how he hated me for it, while needing me all the same. For the first time, Damien sat with that truth instead of drinking it away. 3 weeks later, I found myself in a courtroom that smelled of old carpet and stale coffee. Damien stood there in his only suit, the one from his wedding, while Vincent, his attorney, explained the plea deal. Reckless driving instead of DUI. Still meant 26 weeks of classes, 4,000 in fines and a breathalyzer device in his car. The judge, an older woman with glasses hanging from a chain, warned him flatly, "One slip up and you'll serve 6 months in county." Damien swallowed hard, nodded, and accepted it all. He didn't even glance back at me sitting in the gallery. In the hallway afterward, Lucy caught my arm. Her grip was tight, her voice sharp. "I'm done watching Archie lose his uncle because you and Damien can't get over yourselves," she said. Her eyes were red, but her tone was steady, like she'd rehearsed it. She glared at me. "That spreadsheet, you tracked every dollar you ever spent on him? Every receipt, every date? Do you realize how much control that screams?" I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. "Archie has an allergy training class next week. I want you there. Not as the guy with money. As his uncle." Her eyes softened just a little, then hardened again. She let go of my arm before I could answer. That Tuesday, I sat in a preschool classroom that smelled like crayons and disinfectant. Tiny plastic chairs. Posters with ABCs on the wall. I'd brought laminated cards showing the EpiPen steps, bright pictures, numbered instructions. I handed out copies to every teacher. They passed them around, murmuring thank yous. And then, something small but seismic. Damien looked at me and said, "Thanks." No sarcasm. No edge. Just thanks. The first normal moment we'd had since his birthday. We sat side by side in those two small chairs while the nurse demonstrated with the trainer pen. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe we weren't completely lost. 2 weeks later, Damien texted me about practicing for a job interview. Marketing coordinator at some company he found on Indeed. Not a request for a reference. Just practice. We met at a coffee shop downtown. He showed up with a fresh haircut, khakis, polo shirt. He had questions printed out, trying to look professional. But the interview went sideways fast. He froze when I asked about his 5-year plan, accidentally bringing up jail and drinking. When I asked about weaknesses, he rambled about letting people down. His hands shook holding his resume. I gave him blunt feedback afterward, "Stop apologizing, start selling what you can do." To my surprise, he didn't argue. He just took notes on his phone, asked follow-ups, and listened. That felt new. Then Friday night, Mom called from the ER. Chest pains. Blood pressure through the roof. Stress, they said. By 2 a.m., Damien and I were both in the same waiting room. Sweats, old t-shirts, sitting side by side with styrofoam cups of bitter machine coffee. We didn't talk about money or failures or who was right. We just sat there, taking turns checking on Mom. When the doctor finally came out at 4, he said she was stable but keeping her overnight. Relief hit both of us at once, though neither of us said it. We stayed until visiting hours ended, then went to our cars in silence. 2 days later, Damien called. His voice was hesitant. "Amir wants me to write amends letters. To you. To Lucy. No excuses, no asking for anything, just full responsibility." It sounded like he was asking permission. Which, coming from him, was almost funny. For weeks after, he worked on those letters. Texted me random questions about dates from years back. Called Mom for details, then hung up frustrated when she couldn't remember. Meanwhile, I sat at my own kitchen table one night and started writing my own letter to him. The words spilled out like poison. How I'd used money to control him. How I liked being the savior because it made me feel important. How every check I wrote was less about helping him, and more about keeping him small. I folded it up. Shoved it in my desk drawer. Not ready to admit any of it out loud. Then Lucy called me one Thursday. Her voice was quiet, almost ashamed. "Do you know any good divorce lawyers?" It knocked the wind out of me. She said she wasn't filing yet, just wanted to understand her options. The lawyer told her she'd likely get primary custody, but with Damien's record and money problems, child support would be next to nothing. She cried softly into the phone. "I don't want to break up our family, but I don't know what else to do." And for once, I didn't have an answer. The following week, Daphne from CPS called them in for a formal case review. No small talk, no soft edges, just the facts. She laid it out plain. Any relapse. Any unsafe incident. And Archie will be removed from the home. Damien sat at that table gripping his coffee mug so tight I thought the ceramic might crack. His knuckles were white, his leg bouncing under the table. Lucy, meanwhile, sat rigid, eyes fixed on Daphne's clipboard. Something shifted after that meeting. Lucy started going to Al-Anon. She'd text me after each meeting with things she was learning, like how covering for Damien, making excuses for his behavior, was just enabling him. She admitted she hadn't even realized it. For the first time, it wasn't just Damien being forced to change. It was Lucy too. Around that same time, Damien was out doing food delivery runs when a restaurant manager casually mentioned they were looking for a marketing coordinator. Nothing fancy, just a mid-sized company. But instead of calling me to polish his resume or make introductions, Damien applied on his own. He didn't even tell me until he'd already landed the interview. The text came through late one night. Got an interview. No help this time. Wish me luck. For once, all I had to send back was good luck. And I meant it. 3 days later, the company's HR department called me directly. I was listed as a past employer on his resume. The woman asked me to confirm his employment dates. Nothing more. For a split second I wanted to say something, help him, hurt him, tip the scale either way. But I didn't. I kept my voice neutral. Just dates and titles. That was it. And it felt strange. Strange to finally be neutral when it came to him. That weekend, Lucy asked me to meet her for coffee. She sat across from me, stirring a cup she barely touched, before dropping a truth I hadn't expected. She said she'd always resented the IVF payments. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because those checks came with invisible strings attached. Every time she wanted to disagree with me or push back, she swallowed it. Because, in her words, you paid for Archie to exist. The guilt hit me like a punch to the chest. I apologized, really apologized, for not seeing how my so-called gifts were actually transactions. How I'd forced gratitude out of her by holding the price tag over their lives. She nodded slowly, said she needed me to hear it before things went any further with Damien. Meanwhile at work I was eating my own slice of humble pie. My first big campaign launch tanked. Not just a little, 40% under projections. Juliet made me present the failure analysis to the entire board. I stood there under the fluorescent lights explaining how I had screwed up. No excuses. No scapegoats. Just me. The board members didn't hold back, hard questions, pointed stares. Every bad call I'd made was laid bare in front of them. And it was humiliating. But also sobering. Juliet pulled me aside afterward. Her words cut but stayed with me. Failure is part of growth, Kevin. But hiding from it? That's unacceptable. About 3 weeks later, Damien called. Can I come over? I want to read you something. He showed up at my apartment clutching a stack of papers, his hands trembling slightly. He sat down, unfolded the pages, and began. It was his amends letter. He read slowly, voice shaking at times, taking full responsibility for the drinking, for leaning on me too hard, for resenting me while taking everything I offered. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't beg for help. He just acknowledged. The sincerity was uncomfortable. Almost unbearable. It was so different from the Damien I'd known, the one who deflected, joked, blamed. The next day, he did the same with Lucy. She told me later it was the first time she'd ever heard him take responsibility without attaching an excuse. That week, Damien had his interview at the restaurant company. He called me after, sounding almost surprised. It went okay, but not great. They told him he needed more digital marketing experience, stronger Excel skills. I braced myself for the familiar spiral, complaining, drinking, giving up. But instead, that same night, Damien signed up for free online certifications. He even sent me screenshots of his enrollment. No praise-seeking. No strings. Just proof that he was doing. And for the first time, I believed him. The following week, Amir, his therapist, called me directly. He suggested a joint session. If you two are serious about changing things, you need to define what healthy help actually looks like. I showed up Thursday morning, nerves buzzing, and there was Damien already sitting in the waiting room. Neither of us spoke until Amir ushered us inside. That hour was, awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. We had to define boundaries, clear ones. Where help was okay and where it wasn't. Damien could ask for rides to appointments, but not gas money. I could offer advice, but only if he asked, no swooping in with fixes. And emergencies involving Archie? Always exceptions. It felt less like therapy and more like drafting a business contract with the kid I once shared bunk beds with. Every time I slipped into old habits, listing Damien's failures, Amir stopped me. Every time Damien started whining like a victim, Amir stopped him too. By the end, we had this bizarre official-looking agreement. Not brother and savior. Not enabler and dependent. Just brothers. 2 days later, the Real bomb dropped. Lucy sat Damien down at what he thought was just another quiet Friday dinner. Plates on the table, Archie asleep in the other room, the usual routine. But instead of small talk, she looked him in the eye and told him she needed space. Space to figure out if she even wanted to stay married after everything that had happened. Damien called me afterward. Not for money, not for rescue. Just to let someone know he was parked outside a Walmart, sitting in his car, trying not to fall apart. The following week, he signed a lease on a studio above a dry cleaner. The air smelled of chemicals, the walls were thin, and the place was barely big enough for one person, let alone weekends with a child. But it was what he could afford. The landlord wanted first and last month's rent plus a security deposit. Wiped out what little he had left. I helped him move, loading boxes into my truck. 3 flights of stairs, box after box, both of us silent. No handouts this time. No checks. Just sweat and cardboard. Lucy stayed back at the old place with Archie while Damien and I carried the weight of his new reality up every step. 2 weeks later, there was another knock at his door. Daphne. CPS. Clipboard in hand, calm but stern. She tested smoke detectors, checked window locks, made sure every outlet was covered. She glanced at the corner where Damien had set up a tiny space for Archie, just a pile of toys and a sleeping bag. No bed yet, but something. She asked about his job, his schedule, his plan for keeping this fragile little life stable. And for the first time, Damien had answers. If you can keep this up for another month without incident, she said, I'll recommend closing the case. The relief on his face was so raw I thought he might break down in front of her. And I realized something, Damien only seemed to really process life when he wrote it down, when he could see the details laid out. Those letters he worked on for weeks, the napkin budgets he scribbled, it was like paper made reality real for him in a way words never could. 3 weeks later, temptation came knocking. Damien's delivery company hosted a mixer at a sports bar. He texted me at 8, everyone's drinking. Getting crap for ordering Coke. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Bar noise thundered through the line, laughter, glasses clinking. But Damien didn't say a word. Just breathed. Finally a whisper, I'm in the parking lot. Trying not to go back in. I didn't lecture. Didn't tell him what to do. I just started talking about normal things. The Cubs' terrible season. A ridiculous client complained at work. Random nonsense. We stayed on the phone for 40 minutes until his voice steadied and he said, I'm driving home. When he texted made it, my chest loosened in a way I hadn't felt in years. At 11 that night, I drove over without warning. Knocked on his door and said, come on. We ended up at a 24-hour diner off the highway, sitting in a booth with cracked vinyl seats, drinking coffee so bad it should have been illegal. And for the first time in years, we didn't talk about the heavy stuff. Not money. Not Lucy. Not court. Just life. He told me about a kid on his delivery route who always waited at the window to wave when he pulled up. I told him about Juliet making me redo an entire campaign because she hated the font. We laughed. We remembered what it was like to be just brothers. When the check came, Damien slid cash onto the table for his half. No hesitation. He drove home. I followed behind, headlights trailing him all the way, just to make sure he got there safe. 3 weeks later, he shocked everyone. He finished his court-ordered alcohol classes 2 months early. Perfect attendance. Participated in every session. The instructor even wrote a note for the judge. The early completion shaved $500 off his fines. Might as well have been $5,000 for how tight his money was. He sent me a photo of his certificate with just a single emoji, thumbs up. No speech. No plea for validation. Just proof. I texted back, proud of you. And I meant it. For the first time in years, I really meant it. The next week, Lucy and Damien sat down with a mediator in a sterile conference room. Neutral walls, fluorescent lights, a retired judge guiding the process. They didn't have much to divide. Lucy got the car. Damien got his tools. The mountain of debt got split right down the middle. But when the subject turned to Archie, everything shifted. No arguing. No bitterness. Just focus. They agreed to live within 10 minutes of each other. To communicate through a parenting app instead of fighting over texts. To never badmouth each other to their son. The mediator leaned back, almost surprised. This is the most mature separation I've seen all month. And for once, I believed it. Tuesday, I put the condo on the market. Clean photos, crisp listing, live by noon. Then I called Damien and told him he had 60 days to find somewhere else. When he asked why now, I said the thing I should have said years ago, that keeping the place had been about control more than generosity. I liked knowing I had the leverage. I liked that he needed me for a roof. He surprised me. I figured that out months ago, he said quietly. I've already been looking. I even applied for a recovery housing voucher. Then, out of nowhere, a small logistics company called him about a coordinator role. Entry level. Half of what he used to make. 6-month probation where they could fire him for any reason. But it was a real job, benefits, regular hours, something to put on paper that wasn't delivery driver/court dates. He accepted on the spot. That night he pulled up a budgeting app on his phone and walked me through the plan like he was pitching a client. Rent, child support, utilities, groceries, and if he stuck to it, $50 into savings each month. He looked almost proud showing me that number. It was small, sure, but it was his. 2 weeks into the new job, my bank pinged me, new automatic transfer set up. $50. From Damien's account to mine. First of every month. Memo line, beginning will increase. At that rate, it would take him 40 years to repay me. But that wasn't the point. He was acknowledging the debt, without me demanding it, without me weaponizing a spreadsheet. 3 weeks later, Juliet called me into her office for my 6-month review. She had a spreadsheet up that could have doubled as an autopsy. Every campaign I'd run. Every deadline I'd hit or missed. Every meeting where I'd talked too much or not enough. She pointed to the early months where I'd tried to prove myself by undercutting co-workers and grabbing credit for team wins. Then she slid the cursor to the weeks after she'd called me out. The shift was right there in the numbers. When I shut up and actually listened, our output jumped 20%. Juliet slid a folder across the desk. Probation's over. Your title, salary, and stock options are official. I thanked her, really thanked her, for not writing me off when I was acting like a jerk in a suit. That same afternoon, Daphne called. CPS. One last visit, she said. If it looks good, we close the case. I met her at Damien's studio. Clipboard in hand, she moved through the space like a quiet storm. Locked medicine cabinet? Check. Allergy action plan posted? Check. Fresh EpiPens labeled and in their spots? Check. Lucy and Damien sat at opposite ends of the couch while Daphne talked about progress, about stability, about Archie clearly thriving despite everything. Then she handed over the closure letter, plus the standard warning to keep every safety protocol in place. After she left, they took Archie to the park. No cuddling, no dramatic reconciliation, just 2 parents pushing their kid on the swings, taking turns catching him at the bottom of the slide like a relay team. Sometimes healing looks like that, awkward, quiet, and completely ordinary. The next week, Mom ambushed us with an appointment she'd already booked with a family therapist downtown. Beige office, soft lamps, a box of tissues placed like a centerpiece. We talked about childhood. About Dad leaving. About who we became to survive it. Mom explained how she'd always tried to smooth things over, like peacekeeping was her job description. I admitted I'd gotten addicted to being needed, how fixing made me feel important. Damien talked about standing next to me and feeling like a failure for years, resentment chewing holes through his life. The therapist didn't let us keep it theoretical. We practiced right there. Mom literally sat on her hands to stop herself from jumping in. When we disagreed, I had to let Damien finish without steamrolling him with solutions. And Damien had to ask for specific help instead of waiting for rescue. We left exhausted, wrung out, and strangely lighter. We booked another session. That night, I typed up a short email and hit send. Subject line, what I can offer. The list was blunt. I'll drive Archie to medical appointments with 48 hours notice. I'll run practice interviews if you schedule them in advance. I'll answer true emergency calls about Archie's health. Everything else was off the table. No money. No co-signing. No last-minute babysitting. No fixing your life. Damien wrote back 2 words, fair enough. Then he actually stuck to it. He texted me twice that month, both times inside the lines we'd drawn. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt around my brother in years. Not dread. Not anger. Not that hero itch in my hands. Just trust. About a month later, Damien's co-workers landed a big account and invited him out for happy hour. That used to be his downfall, the bar, the laughter, the clink of glasses. But instead of caving, he texted me a photo from outside the bar. The caption? Heading to AA instead. I stared at my screen, my throat tightening. He didn't need to spell it out, I knew exactly what that meant. Then, around 11 that night, another text lit up my phone. 90 days sober today. Thanks for answering that night. I sat there for a long moment, then saved the message like it was gold. I sent back a single thumbs up emoji and I knew he'd understand. The following week, Lucy called while I was pushing a cart through the grocery store. She told me she and Damien were still living apart, but they'd started couples counseling. For once, they were learning how to talk without screaming over each other. Money was brutally tight with 2 rents to pay, but somehow they were managing. Lucy had picked up extra shifts. Damien was running food deliveries on weekends. But more than anything, it was her voice that caught me off guard. She sounded calmer, more grounded. Like she was finally in the driver's seat of her own life, not just a passenger being tossed around in Damien's chaos. 6 weeks later, we all gathered at the park for Archie's 5th birthday. The same park where not so long ago we'd celebrated CPS finally closing the case. Damien showed up with an EpiPen trainer in his hand. And he turned it into a game. Every adult had to take a turn practicing while Archie giggled and coached them through the steps. Blue to the sky, orange to the thigh. He shouted proudly, bouncing on his toes. Mom nailed it on her first try. Lucy fumbled twice before getting it right. When it was my turn, I deliberately botched the steps just so Archie could correct me, his grin stretching wide as he got to be the expert. Even some of the other parents joined in, laughing, cheering, turning something scary into something normal. And Damien? He stayed sober the whole party. Raised a plastic champagne flute of apple juice when we toasted Archie. His smile was nervous but real. 8 months had passed since that awful night, since Archie's face swelled and Damien called me sobbing for help. 8 months and everything looked different. Damien had made 6 monthly payments, $50 each, never late. He'd stayed sober. He still went to meetings twice a week. He kept his job, even when the company cut hours. Lucy and Damien were still separated, but they were co-parenting better apart than they ever had together. Mom's blood pressure was finally under control, now that she wasn't constantly putting out fires between her sons. And Archie? Thriving. Kindergarten teacher said he was confident, happy, and quick to make friends. Damien and I weren't close the way we used to be. No constant calls, no frantic rescues. These days, we talked maybe once a week, and usually just about logistics. But here's the thing, we were honest. No more games. No more power plays. No more savior and victim. And maybe that was better. Because all that closeness we used to have? It was fake. Built on money, guilt, and resentment. At least now, when Damien told me he was okay, I actually believed him. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.